What's up, guys? Steven 1, 2, and 2, and it's list day. Ah, yes, Top Tuesday, the one that pays the bills. And we are going to decide to continue our review of every main set in the game, and the next one is Pharaoh's Servant. Yeah, we're getting through all the main sets of the original Duel Monsters Yu-Gi-Oh! And as soon as we're done with these, we're getting out of familiar territory, and these are actually going to start becoming actual work. Pharaoh's Servant was cool because I actually bought a box of this back in the day, or rather my mommy did for my birthday, I think. That might have been Magician's Force. But either way, I actually had a lot of this set, and the reason why I like this set so much, even though it's probably arguably not as good as Spell Ruler, is because there was tons of trap cards in this set, which is really funny to say because like almost none of them made it on this list because most of them are really bad trap cards. Yeah, I'm pretty sure this is the set where they were all like negate a field spell, negate an equip spell, negate like really very strangely specific trap cards for negating like very specific things, which are, you know, obviously bad when you have something like Magic Jammer. As always, we're going to look at this set as much as we can in a bubble and assume that every card in the game is only these 100 cards. However, some of these cards are relevant into the future, so if they kind of are there for tiebreakers, that's what we're going to use them for. Also, the honorable mentions in this one, there's one honorable mention that should be on the list. It's really hard to tell because its effect is so weird that it's hard to tell whether or not it would actually have any implications in the current meta, so I'm actually not positive where to put it on the list, so I'm going to talk about it anyway. Less as an honorable mention, more as a I didn't know where to put it. But anyway, let's get started. Pharaoh's Servant. First up is Prohibition, probably the world's most mediocre side deck card. Ah yes, Prohibition. When you don't know what to play in your side deck, play Prohibition. Prohibition is a continuous spell that reads, activate by calling one card name. While this card's on the field, cards with that name and their effects cannot be used. Cards already on the field do not count, including face downs. Basically, when this card's faced on the field, you declare one card and your opponent can't use that card unless it's already on the field before this thing was played. This card's a really solid side deck option if you really have no other idea what to play, and it works extremely well against decks that are centered around one specific monster, something like Spirals with Super Agent or Dark Magician or Blue Eyes White Dragon. Is it the perfect side deck against those decks? No, but it most certainly would be a giant pain in the ass if you called like Super Agent against Spirals. Most of those decks, I think at this point, even like Harpies and things, have a way of getting around it because those monsters aren't considered that monster while they're in the hand, but when they enter the field, they are called the name. So maybe you can't use them because they become the monster's name on the field, but then they can't be used because it says they can't, because it says monsters and their effects can't be used. So it still works, even if it's a monster that changes its name? Oh, the card's super weird. I think I'm correct though. So even if a monster changes its name, it still can't use its effect because it's changing its name into something that is stated that it can't be used. And this card was already in the field established, so that should still hold true. It's certainly a really weird card, and it's probably a ruling nightmare, but hey, it's certainly a pain in the butt against decks that revolve around one monster. Number 9 is Magic Drain, a counter trap card. When your opponent activates a spell card, you can activate this card, negate that activation, and destroy that spell card, unless your opponent can discard one spell card from their hand, in which they can, in turn, negate this card's effect. The cool thing about this thing is it does not have the discard effect that like Magic Jammer has, so it's immediately a 1-for-1 instead of a +1, and even if it doesn't negate the spell that was played that it's activating against, it at least gets one spell out of their hand, which normally means it's at least dealing with one spell, so it's always a 1-for-1. The other interesting thing about this card is half the time when your opponent goes to play a spell and you play this thing, they may not actually have another spell in their hand in order to negate it, so it might be just a free negate, and even if they do have another spell in their hand, they may choose not to discard it because the one in their hand is more valuable than the one that's being negated. Especially against pendulums. Pendulums have a hard time dealing with this if they don't play a high spell count, because you go to play a pendulum scale as a spell, you go to negate it, and they're like, oh, I don't actually have any spells, all I have is pendulum monsters in my hand. So this is actually kind of an interesting tack against pendulum decks. There you go, that's a cool use for the card. I filmed a field trip video before this, so I've been running around all day. I'm exhausted, so if I seem a little haphazard, that is why. Sprinkles! Number 8 is Nobleman of the Crossout and Nobleman of Extermination. I will have to give the edge to Nobleman of the Crossout because it sees a lot more play, although they're kind of a pair, so I might as well throw them in the same slot. Nobleman of Extermination reads, select, destroy, and remove from play. Oh my god, is that what it really says? This thing needs some problem-solving text ASAP. One speller trap your opponent controls. If it was a trap card, both players remove from play all copies of that card from their decks. If you're playing against a trap-heavy deck and it's a bunch of traps that they can't just chain to it, like something like Solemn Strike, this thing is an absolute blow because it gets rid of all the Solemn Brigade in one foul swoop. Well, I guess all their Solemn Strike copies at least. I think the biggest downfall of this is most traps are probably chainable to it, so you can still get that one effect off. So, okay, it's not that great, which is probably why we go to Nobleman of the Crossout instead. Is a GOAT card. Target one face down monster on the field, destroy it, and if you do, banish it. See, this one is actually got the problem solving text, which is what the other one should say. So, that would mean extermination does indeed target, in case that was not obvious, because it most certainly wasn't. If that monster that you banished was a flip effect monster, both players banish all copies of the monster from their decks, a lot like if it was a trap card with extermination. This is why it's a GOAT card, because things with like Magician of Faith, if you hit that with this thing, it gets rid of it. You don't have to worry about them bringing it back with something, so, like, I don't know what, Shallow Grave? So yeah, this deals with the card pretty solid, and it's an interesting tech against any decks that we get down the pipeline that end up being flip effects. I remember this was a cute tech against Shaddolls when they first came out, because you would get like banish their Falco or their Dragon, and they'd be like, ah, Nobleman of the Crossout. And if they were running more than one copy, it did kind of knock out some of their plays for later in the duel. Is it completely viable nowadays? I don't know. Being a normal spell is kind of a knock against it. But like I said, if you end up ever getting a cool flip effect deck, something like Subterrors, but actually good, the jokes, then it might actually end up being a pretty solid little side deck card. Number 7 is Dust Tornado. Ah, yes, Dust Tornado. Bad MST. Dust Tornado is a normal trap that reads target one spell or trap on the field, destroy it, and if you do, you can take one spell or trap from your hand and set it to the field. So basically, it's just MST, but it's a trap, which makes it slow. However, it is the same spell speed, so you can still use it during your opponent's turn and hit them during that good old end phase, deal with a trap card that they might have. The weirdo end of its resolution where it lets you set a spell or trap from your hand is kind of weird, and at first doesn't sound like it's very useful. However, if it's setting a trap card, that means on your turn, if you did this during, like, say, the end phase of your opponent's turn, it lets you set a trap during their turn, and then during your turn, you can now activate that trap card. And because it wasn't on the field during most of their turn, that means it was avoiding your opponent's, like, Dust Tornadoes or MSTs, so it's less likely to get hit if it's one of those trap cards that's not necessarily defensive, but it's more like a proactive trap card, like something like, I don't know, Magician's Navigate, which you might not actually want to use in response to something. You might just want to use it to get monsters from your deck to the field, so you don't necessarily want to chain it to anything because you want that play to go through and not have anything weird happen to the two monsters you get. So the fact that you can just set this during the end phase means you don't have to chain it to your opponent's MST or something. I know it's kind of a niche, weirdo interaction, but it does give you some value, which is why you would ever play this over MST, although most of the times you probably would just play MST. And I'm pretty sure this thing saw most of its play because MST did spend some of its time on the banned or forbidden limited list. I think it was banned at one point and then it sat at 1 for a while. So people who needed more spell or trap removal were putting in Dust Tornadoes because it's like a slow MST, but it serves the same 1-for-1 function. I'm pretty sure that last part was really niche and didn't come up very much, but it's kind of neat with what you can do with it. Trap cards, spells don't matter. Number 6 is Call of the Haunted. Call of the Haunted is a great continuous trap card that reads, target one monster in your graveyard, special summon it to your side of the field in attack position. If this card leaves the field, destroy the monster. When that target is destroyed, destroy this card. That last part says destroy, which ends up with a very strange situation where if that monster is not destroyed, but it's like spun to the deck, or spun to the hand, or bounced is to the hand, spun is to the deck. Those are your player terms. Or if something like banished out of play and it's not actually destroyed before it leaves the field, this thing gets stuck on the field in an extremely awkward, somebody walked in with my pants down kind of thing, where you really can't do anything with it. It's stuck on your field. It doesn't just destroy itself like it should. It's just kind of there. Magic planter, I guess. But the fact this thing lets you res one monster from your graveyard, and because it is a trap card, this also let you do it on your opponent's turn, which means the versatility of Call of the Haunted has put it like as a relevant trap card way into the current meta. Is there better options now? Well, we have Monster Reborn, we have Oasis the Dragon Souls, we have Back to the Front, which is the same thing as Oasis the Dragon Souls, but it's a regular trap card, so it doesn't have that whole tied to the monster shtick that this thing also has. But even still, Call of the Haunted does have some advantages because it puts a monster in attack mode, which the other ones don't, except Monster Reborn. But Monster Reborn is a spell card that can't be used during your opponent's turn, and there is some utility to that. In a deck with something like, I don't know, Cosmos, being able to play your Dark Destroyer from the graveyard to your opponent during your opponent's turn to pop something, that utility is really solid. And if you're playing something like Giant Trunade from the last set, because this is continuous, you can stick it back in your hand, set it, and use it again. And there's certain applications there which make this card pretty solid. Has it been power creeped a little bit? Sure. Is it still kind of relevant? Yeah. Call of the Haunted is a really solid card. The top 5 is alive.
Stephanie, input.
If anyone gets that reference, you're old as me. Number 5 is JINZO. Ah yes, JINZO. Mr. Cab. JINZO is a great level 6 dark machine monster that reads trap cards and their effects on the field cannot be activated. Any trap cards on the field currently are negated. Long story short, nobody can use trap cards. Whether they're continuous, whether they're counters, whether they're face down, whether they're face up, don't matter. You can't use them. They all gonna fizzle. Level 6 means he requires a tribute in order to summon. However, that 2400 attack makes him pretty solid monster, and he's kind of a big body, so he's a little hard to deal with if you are a trap-based deck, something like, I don't know, Paleo. Oh, Paleo would hate this so bad. Because your Toad can't even get over it. You gotta make a Mistar Boy first with only your frogs. Ugh. It's really crazy because JINZO is, you know, pretty much been a relevant card all the way since GOAT. And, you know, he's still a really solid card if your deck can play him. Obviously against a deck that is running lots of trap cards. If your opponent's not running any trap cards, he's completely dead. So he's at least a viable side deck option for something like a Pendulum deck, which can just kind of pendulum summon him. Also, he's super nostalgic. One of Joey's signature cards that he stole from Esperoba back in the anime in Battle City when he was just, you know, dueling a bunch of B-list characters while Yugi's off doing main story stuff. And he's just kind of a really cool card. I like JINZO. I actually have my original first edition Pharaoh Servant. He is like never seen any play. He's mint. Oh. I like to brag about me JINZO. And there's really not much else to say about him. Negating all your opponent's traps, really solid card. It's good to see that he's still kind of relevant. Let's keep going. Here we get to the pretty much must be at the bottom of the list by default because it's on the limited forbidden list in some fashion, and then that means we are at Limiter Removal. Limiter Removal is a quick play spell that reads double the attack of all machine monsters that you currently control until the end of the turn. During the end phase of this turn, destroy all those monsters. Limiter Removal is at 1 currently on the forbidden limiter list. And why is that? Well, I'm not super positive. Obviously, with decks like Cyber Dragon and Ancient Gear Golem, being able to stick a giant machine monster, most likely a fusion monster, onto the field is not super difficult for those decks. And when you already have something like Power Bond, that monster is probably coming out with some absurd attack power. Being able to then double that again means that you are swinging for game most certainly with one giant attack. Machine monsters tend to be big. Look at the trains, look at the Cyber Dragons, look at hell, you know, pretty much any machine deck has access to something that's just a big body. Is it super viable because the thing is completely unsearchable? Yeah, pretty much, and I think putting this to 3 wouldn't really cause a big deal. The worst that's going to happen is you're going to see some jerk doing the Beaver Warrior thing that Asian Eyes posted forever ago with Primal Seed, because that's a 3, and BLS, because that's a 3, and I don't know, DNA Surgery, because that's a 3, or just Cyber Dragon, I guess, because you just play it. And then you just make this thing loop, 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 loop. But even still, even with all that stuff at 3, Macrocosmos, which is probably the most important part of the combo, because otherwise the Primal Seed thing doesn't work, is still a 1. So if with that at 1, this at 1, it'll never work. Hell, they can come back to 3, and no one is going to go to a YCS and play that stupid loop. Come on. But yeah, at 1, it's safe. It'll probably be at 1 for a very long time, but it probably could come back. But because it is at 1, it gets a higher spot on the list just by default, which is probably why I have that one hidden, or not hidden, honorable mention, which I don't know where to put because I don't think it's very good, but it's banned, so it's like, eh. Number 3 is Imperial Order. Negate all spell effects on the field during your standby phase. You must pay 700 life points, or this card is destroyed. Back when this first came out, I think it was implied this was an optional effect. However, when it was errated and then taken off the ban list, it was made as a not optional effect, so you can't just turn it off when you want. How do you talk about this card and where do you put it on the list if it received an errata, but it's still a solid card and didn't totally break it? Well, it's at 1, so it's high on the list, and it's better than limiter removal. Negates limiter removal. So I guess that means it's number 3 and not 4. Being at 1 in the current meta means it's completely unsearchable, it's really hard to grab, and it's probably just like the world's worst top deck. But if you open it and you're playing against something like Pendulums, oh boy, that's an auto-win duel, or very least extremely close to it. And he spells better. But hey, if you're playing against an opponent who's just really reliant on spell cards one way or shape or form, this card is just an absolute blowout as long as you don't need them as well. Yes, Imperial Order, I've lost to it many times. It really stinks, but it is a really powerful card and it's a great side deck option if you're not really sure what to put in your side deck, as long as it doesn't hurt you too. Number 2, which is the first of 3 banned cards that are currently on the ban list. Yeah, all these old sets are like most of the ban list. There's very few new cards because as new cards come out, you know, we're figuring out how to make them that aren't totally busted. You know, every once in a while you get one on there, but half the time there are old cards getting banned because of a stupid new card. Tyrant Neptune. But anyway, what does Premature Burial do? Activate this card by paying 800 life points, target a monster in your graveyard, special summon to the field, and equip it to this card. Or equip this card to it, rather. In attack position, when this card is destroyed, destroy the equipped monster. Basically, this thing is called the Haunted, but it is not a trap card, it is an equip spell. Meaning that it is not a spell speed 2, it is only spell speed 1, but because it is a spell, you can choose when to activate it. And because it is an equipped spell, it acts like a continuous effect, meaning you can bounce it and abuse it, and that's probably why it is banned. However, I'm not completely convinced it needs to stay banned because, you know, we have Monster Reborn, which is 100% objectively better because it doesn't have a life point cost, it doesn't get stuck to the monster, it can't get negated by MST. Monster Reborn is better. We could have Premature Burial. Like I said, the only reason why Premature Burial would ever see play over Monster Reborn is because it is an equipped spell. You can search it with Hidden Armory, and because Hidden Armory only turns off your normal summons, I guess it means you can then use this thing immediately, which is kind of good, I guess. And if you milled a monster off of your Hidden Armory, ooh, the setup though. But no, I think the major reason why this thing is still on the ban list is because as a equipped spell, it acts as a continuous style effect, so you can bounce it and keep using it, bounce and keep using it. So it's kind of loopy. However, at 1, I don't think it would be that big of a deal. But yeah, the life point cost though is completely not an issue, so that is most certainly not balancing the card. It would be kind of fun to see this thing at 1, but because it's banned, it gets a high spot on the list because that's just how my lists work. Ah, the fabled honorable mentions. We actually have 3 this time around. The first one is Magical Hats. Conceal the Dark Magician. Magical Hats is one of the weirdest cards in this set for 2 reasons? 2 reasons. No, 3 reasons. Let's go with 3. Number 1, every one of its instances in the anime it is always portrayed as what I believe is at least a quick play spell card, which would make this card a hell of a lot better. And it is also apparently a quick play spell card that generates, I don't know, tokens instead of whatever it does in this version of the card, and they maintain on the field until they are destroyed. This one only lasts till the end of the turn. But what does it do? During your opponent's battle phase, target one of your monsters, put it face down, take 2 speller traps out of your deck, put them face down as if they were monsters, shuffle a lot of them, put them back face down, and then continue the battle phase as usual. And then at the end of the turn, you destroy the 2 monsters that were actually the spells and traps. This thing is probably one of the weirdest effects in the game. There isn't any more cards in the game that are quite this strange because it doesn't generate tokens. Those monsters aren't tokens. They are monsters for the time being. Like, that's such a strange thing. However, what this thing does do, and that's our second reason why it's on the list but not on the list, is because for the longest time it was one of the only real reasons, or only one real ways that we could mill a spell or trap out of our decks. You would just wait till your opponent's battle phase, flip this thing, as soon as they enter the battle phase, you get 2 spell or traps out of your deck, put them face down as monsters, and during the end phase, you either lost a monster monster, or they just, you know, your monster survived, and then they'd go to the graveyard and you basically effectively milled 2 of your choice spell or traps. So if you had something that activated in the graveyard like breakthrough skill or UA penalty box, then you have it, basically you have it at your disposal for the rest of the turn. I mean, it's super slow. It requires your opponent going into a battle phase, and we all know that if it requires your opponent to do anything specific, it is bad. That is bad Yu-Gi-Oh! But like I said, until we got Foolish Burial Goods, it was really the only way to do it without Volleyball Chain, which is banned. So hey, you know, it was at least worth the mention. And the other mention was Chain Destruction. That's actually an honorable mention and not just I don't know where to put it. When a monster with 2,000 or more attack is summoned to the field, you can destroy that monster and then destroy all copies of that monster in your opponent's hand and main deck. Chain Destruction, the thing that Yugi used to beat the Exodia Rare Hunter. The cool thing about this card is if your opponent has some sort of 2,000 or less attack monster that their deck absolutely needs, like, I don't know, Alistair. Alistair would be an okay target for this. They can just shuffle him back into the deck, but I mean, it would at least kind of be annoying for them because they can't fusion summon at least right away. Means it deals with all copies that they have. So if you have something like, I don't know, a combo with Macrocosmos or something, this thing becomes an absolute blowout card against certain decks. If it just banished on its own like another card that come out, I think in like the next 2 sets, then it would obviously be a hell of a lot better, but that 2,000 attack power limbo stick is high enough where it's got plenty of targets, and against certain decks this thing is absolutely great. It's not as good as it used to, which is why it's only an honorable mention, but it at least is good in the set it came out, so I figured I should probably mention the card. And then the honorable mention I've been mentioning all video honorably, Time Seal, a banned normal track card that reads, skip the draw phase of your opponent's next turn. Yes, this card is banned and is really obvious as to why. Basically a trap version of Yatagarasu. If you keep using this card, your opponent will never have a draw phase, meaning if you've exhausted their resources, you pretty much just auto win. Back in the day, I'm pretty sure this thing got put on the ban list because someone figured out how to use, I don't know, probably, I'm guessing, Mask of Darkness and Tsukiyomi, the spirit monster, to keep recycling this card. If you had 1 copy in the grave, 1 copy in the field, you just kept using Mask of Darkness, presumably you could lock your opponent out of ever having a draw phase ever. Now, this card at 1 would pretty much make that completely undoable, so I think it could come off the ban list as a banned card, maybe you maintain as a limited card. However, putting it at 3, I'm not really sure anyone would even put in the effort in order to try to loop this thing. Like, it's a 1-for-1 at best because your opponent's just not drawing, but you're using a card, and there's better trap cards that get you more advantage in this game. I don't know. Feels kind of bad Yu-Gi-Oh to me, but who knows? Maybe you could loop it. Maybe there's some deck that can abuse the crap out of it, like Palios or something. So I don't know. It's really hard to say, which is why I didn't know whether I should put it on the list or not, because it is banned, so it gets a high slot, but like it doesn't feel like it's as good as every other card on the list. So I don't know. Let me know in the comments below what you guys think of Time Seal. I think it's totally way been power creeped out of relevancy, but who knows? Number 1 is a tie, because I totally forgot about it and recorded this whole video, and I guess we're going to just say I can do what I want. The real number 1 is Cold Wave, because it's an absolute blowout. It's a banned ass broken spell card that reads, this card can only be activated at the start of your main phase, Uno. Until the end of your next turn, you or your opponent cannot play or set spells or traps. Basically meaning if you're playing an extremely heavy monster effect based deck, you can play this thing. Your opponent can't pretty much do anything with their spell or traps for the next until your turn, end of your next turn. So this pretty much locks your opponent out of 2/3 of the card types in the game for them to be able to play. Now you could make the argument that in the modern Yu-Gi-Oh, most of the things are monster effects now, and your spells and traps are actually extenders and not power cards, so maybe it wouldn't be super relevant, or it most certainly wouldn't be as broke as it used to be. However, it's still an absolute blowout of a card, and I still think against certain decks it would just auto win. So, you know, like it's like, I don't know, pendulums, this thing would just be kind of stupid to use against them. It would be totally unfair. So it's certainly a arguably bannable card. So it's our number one. Our secret number one that I totally forgot was on the list because I sorted this thing by YGO Pro and it's the only extra deck monster, so I forgot it was there and I didn't weed out another card for it. Thousand Eyes Restrict. Thousand Eyes Restrict is a level 1 fusion dark spellcaster that reads, no other monsters in the field can declare an attack. You can target one of your opponent's monsters, equip it to this card as equipped spell card. This monster's stats become the stats of the monster equipped. If this card will be destroyed by battle, the equipped card is destroyed instead. This guy used to be on the ban list for the absolute longest time, then he got put to 1, then he got put to 3, and the reason why I wanted to at least include him on the list in some fashion, he probably should have been much higher, but like I said, I totally forgot about him. I don't feel like re-recording this. Is because he is a great instant fusion target, because instant fusion just brings him out for 1,000 life points. You can target an opponent's monster, instant fusion prevents him from attacking, and his own effect prevents everyone else from attacking, so you're really not doing any attacking that turn. However, being able to 1-for-1 suck up one of your opponent's monsters and then, I don't know, link this away for Link Kuriboh is a really solid swinging advantage, and, you know, he does have some interesting utilities, and he does have his own deck now, so he's got a little bit of a legacy power boost. But in this set, he was a fantastic card. And I think like 2 sets later or whatever, we finally got Metamorphosis, which was our early version of Instant Fusion, which allowed you to turn a GOAT token into this thing, and that's how we got GOAT format. So yeah, either one of these are your number one. It's either Nostalgia Power or actually a broken card. I don't know. Let's say he's actually number 6. What was 6? 6 was Call of the Hunted. Shit. Whatever. You tell me where you think Thousand Eyes Restrict should be. So anyway, guys, let me know in the comments below what you guys think of my haphazard, I'm completely exhausted and totally forgot Thousand Eyes Restrict list. And remember, guys, if you don't draw the meta, who will? I will see you guys next time for a list I hopefully don't have to do after a week of me getting up at 4 every day.
Heh, clicking the subscribe button's a good move. I guess there's a first time for everything. Feel free to click on these third-rate videos from a fourth-rate YouTuber. But I don't have time for such amateurs. Come on, Mokuba, let's go get ice cream.